Weenis niks niet maar wie. Heel een schomming het loopt speaker wat ze de slaat smissen. Laers die burkies. Wees er wie mijn niet gaat nou wie fit. Stel word I'm on beach is de nation maar bezwaar oiler val. Er is het nou bekend je vet niet aan het jammer nee. Wil spat sarster. Of zo raar. Val niet erg de bluff zaat zich niet. Dan dat ze niet echt mij versterft niet lopen. Zo elf sharp films. Zij vervallen niet aan mij. Er is de wit velle vassies. En aan missen dit is. Namen dit is zo we shall fricht wat aber zich niet vast nerf. Hier wordt schrift van sheer belasebet. En ja, als je niet aware dat nou wish ik heb. Wish dat hij shak ik aan. Mag niet er voor de boedelier vet. En ja, ook hier vet niet weet heel ziller achter wish. Maar niet of de zes geld met de valler op snel om bij ook kunnen. Zeer de wit heel mij vet. Vloed de wit zo het. Er wij is er stuurt vet wat meer dish. Ja, neer vet. Zeg zo wish niet zo we in sloffish. Er is zo ik al meer naar herp zo. Nee, hersla hij maar surfen maar. Ja, nerve er voor knife deze af dish. Er nog hier vet maar vloek uit het vallende veld op zo'n stikramro. Harry den vestiert she zibben. Semar full of eat at slutnish. Sarna smro wokel of at valnet wie looks ze wat de heroil. I had single at dear what slur out with you. Stir there's no wish. Mro farger and now lots are free finisher of one shitser magnet on shum. Did nape scale of fuzzery. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of The Secret Betrayal, 350 words, in paragraph form. While Leora spent her days dreaming of a future with Tay, weaving plans and picking fabrics for their wedding, she had no idea that the man she loved was weaving a secret of his own, one that would shatter her world. Tay had been meeting Sophia, his ex, in quiet corners of the city, laughing at jokes only they shared, pretending that the past could suddenly rewrite itself. He smiled at Leora every morning, kissed her hand, whispered promises of forever, all while hiding the truth behind practiced eyes. The love she poured into him, the trust she nurtured, was quietly being stolen. Her savings, which she had counted coin by coin, the money she had set aside to make their wedding a dream, were being spent on Sophia. Golden threads, sparkling jewels, lavish dinners, and endless flowers, all funded by the very woman who believed she was building their life together. Leora had worked for years, skipping small luxuries, saving every bit she could, and yet it was fueling a betrayal she didn't even suspect. Tay's calls grew frequent, but they were careful, coded, full of lies disguised as concern. Every time Leora smiled, every time she shared her excitement about the wedding, he nodded, listened, and tucked her joy away like a secret he would never share. He had become a master of deception, a man who could hold two lives in his hands, the life he showed Leora and the one he had reignited with Sophia. The worst part was how ordinary it all seemed. Nothing screamed betrayal until one day, a friend handed Leora something she couldn't ignore. A golden envelope, its corners embossed, the words of an invitation staring back at her. Her heart raced as she read the names. Her name wasn't there. Tay and Sophia were getting married, and she had unknowingly paid for every detail. Every coin she had saved, every hope she had carried, had become the found. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of The Shattered Discovery, 350 words, in paragraph form. Leora couldn't believe her eyes when her closest friend, Amari, handed her a golden envelope with a trembling hand. "I thought you should see this," he whispered, but Leora already sensed something was wrong. Her fingers shook as she opened it, and the moment she saw the names printed inside, her heart sank like a stone. Tay and Sophia. Her name wasn't anywhere to be found. Every thought, every dream she had held close for years, the plans for a wedding filled with laughter, songs, and the warmth of family, had been erased, replaced by a cruel, mocking reality. She stared at the invitation, her mind racing. The fonts shimmered like her savings had shimmered in the sun when she had counted them, every coin carefully tucked away for this day that would never be hers. The flowers, the fabrics, the jewelry, the golden threads and diamond jewels she had painstakingly paid for, were now adorning a celebration she wasn't part of. Every rose, every sparkling candle, every carefully embroidered gown had her fingerprints, her effort, her love, and yet she was not welcome. Anger, betrayal, and heartbreak collided inside her. Leora felt tears prick her eyes, but it wasn't just sadness, it was a fierce, burning sense of injustice. How could someone she trusted so completely take everything she had worked for and give it to the woman she had never truly known? How could the man she had planned her life around laugh and smile while she stood in the shadows, invisible, as her own money built his new beginning. She sank onto a nearby bench, feeling the weight of the city around her. The bustling streets, the distant cries of vendors, the laughter that now felt cruel in her ears. And yet, in the depth of her despair, a thought began to grow, quiet but strong. They may have stolen her day, but they had not stolen her spirit. She was not broken. If anything. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of Nights of Tears, Days of Strength, 350 words, in paragraph form. For nights, Leora let herself break. She cried in the quiet of her apartment in NightAITA, letting the tears fall freely, soaking her pillow, her sheets, her heart. She whispered his name into the darkness, each syllable a mix of love, betrayal and disbelief. The city outside continued its rhythm, unaware of the storm raging inside her. She felt hollow, as if the dream she had nurtured for years had been ripped from her hands. Every corner of her home reminded her of what could have been. The carefully chosen gifts, the wedding sketches, the notes she had written for Tay. It all felt like ashes now, scattered by a wind of deceit she never saw coming. But one morning, as the first light of the sun spilled over NightAITA's rooftops, something shifted. Leora opened her eyes, and instead of the heaviness that had clouded her, she felt fire. A sharp, burning determination that made her chest tighten and her fists clench. She realized that crying, though necessary, could not undo the betrayal. She could grieve, but she would not stay broken. Tay had taken her money, her trust, her plans, but he could not take her will, her mind, her heart's strength. That morning, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not be a victim of his lies. She would not allow heartbreak to define her life. Instead, she would channel every ounce of pain, every pang of anger, into building something they could never steal. She would rise higher than he ever imagined, and the life she had dreamt of would be hers, not given but earned. Leora began making plans. Not revenge in the small, petty sense, but a transformation, a way to turn betrayal into triumph. Every step, every decision from that moment forward would carry the weight of purpose. She would prove that a heart betrayed could also be the heart that conquered. And deep inside, beneath the anger, here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of the silent preparation, 350 words, in paragraph form. While Tay and Sophia laughed and celebrated their upcoming wedding, Leora moved in silence, like a shadow no one noticed. She didn't post her pain on social media, she didn't rant to friends, and she certainly didn't confront them. She knew that anger without action was wasted energy. Instead, she poured herself into something powerful, planning her own comeback. Every morning she woke before the city stirred, her mind sharp and focused. Every evening she stayed awake, researching and plotting. She studied property records, learning which buildings, lands, and assets were unclaimed, vulnerable, waiting for someone smart enough to take them. She spoke to lawyers one by one, each conversation careful, precise. She asked questions that seemed casual but were anything but. She signed papers that Tay and Sophia couldn't even imagine existed, documents that quietly shifted ownership, that ensured her money, her effort, her justice would have real power. She read contracts, memorized clauses, and learned the rules that governed the city she had called home for years. Each signature she put down, each form she filed, was a step closer to turning her heartbreak into a victory they would never see coming. At the same time, she strengthened her business. Her small trading stall in NightAITA's central market, once modest, once quiet, was becoming a hub for fabrics, jewelry, and spices that people couldn't resist. She reinvested wisely, her profits growing faster than anyone expected. Every coin she earned now was hers alone, untouchable, building a future that no betrayal could destroy. She moved quietly, patiently, knowing that when the time came, the surprise would be devastatingly complete. They were busy planning a wedding fueled by her savings, blind to the fact that she was planting the seeds for a reckoning. And in that quiet preparation, here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of A Queen in the Market, 350 words, in paragraph form. Leora threw herself into her work with a passion that left little room for anything else. Her small trading stall in NightAITA's bustling central market had once been just a modest space where she sold colorful fabrics, handmade jewelry, and fragrant spices, but now it was the heartbeat of her determination. Every morning, she arranged her goods with care, making the vibrant textiles shimmer in the sun, placing the sparkling jewelry where it caught every eye, and letting the aroma of cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg draw in customers like a warm invitation. People began to notice her, not just for the quality of her goods, but for the energy she radiated, a quiet confidence that said she had survived and was thriving. Word spread quickly. Customers came from distant parts of the city, then neighboring towns, drawn by the promise of beauty and excellence. Leora expanded, opening new stalls, hiring trusted staff, and making deals that multiplied her profits faster than she could have imagined. Her business became more than a stall. It became a chain, a small empire that carried her name and her vision. Every coin she earned was hers, earned with effort, wisdom, and courage, a sharp contrast to the money Tay had stolen, which now only fueled his shallow celebrations and empty promises. While Tay and Sophia wasted time on love songs, rehearsals, and the glitter of their upcoming wedding, Leora was building something enduring. She didn't rush, she didn't show off. She let her success speak. Each shipment of fabric, each carefully chosen gem, each satisfied customer became a brick in the foundation of her triumph. She felt the fire inside her grow stronger every day, not from anger, but from the knowledge that she was reclaiming her life, one step at a time. By the time the city whispered about the young woman who had turned heartbreak into an empire. Here's a fully expanded, emotional, and conversational version of the wedding day, 350 words, in paragraph form. The city of Nadira was alive with celebration. Streets shimmered with colorful fabrics and golden decorations, vendors sold fragrant flowers, and the scent of roasting meats and sweet pastries filled the air. Everyone seemed to be talking about Tay and Sophia's wedding, the event that had become the talk of the town. People whispered about the glittering hall, the musicians rehearsing drums and songs, and the anticipation of a union they believed would be perfect. The excitement was infectious, and for Tay and Sophia, it felt like a victory, a triumph they had claimed at the expense of someone else's trust. Inside the grand hall, the atmosphere was electric. Chandeliers sparkled above, catching the sunlight and scattering rainbows across walls decorated with flowers in every imaginable shade. Guests filled the rows of seats, laughing, greeting one another, and admiring the couple. Tay stood at the front, his proud smile wide, Sophia by his side, her gown shimmering like liquid gold. Their eyes met in a shared glance of triumph, convinced that nothing could touch their happiness. Drums beat steadily, musicians strummed, and voices rose in song, creating a rhythm that felt unstoppable. Everyone noticed the lavish details, the diamond-studded crowns, the golden threads on Sophia's gown, the intricate carvings on the chairs and tables, but no one knew the truth. Every jewel, every flower, every shimmer of silk had come from Leora's savings, the money she had set aside for the life she had imagined with Tay. And yet, here they were, believing they had won, completely unaware that the very foundation of their celebration was built on betrayal and stolen trust. As the ceremony began, the couple's laughter filled the room, their voices mingling with music and chatter, their joy seemingly unstoppable. They didn't know that the tides were about to too. Here's a fully expanded, emotional, and conversational version of her unexpected arrival, 350 words, in paragraph form. The music paused for just a moment, though no one knew why. Then at the entrance of the grand hall, a figure appeared, tall, poised, radiating power and grace. Leora walked in, her African attire more breathtaking than anyone had imagined. Her geli was wrapped perfectly, rising like a crown that declared her presence without a word. The fabric of her gown shimmered under the chandelier lights, golden threads catching every sparkle, as if the stars themselves had chosen to descend and drape her in their glow. The guests turned, mouths slightly open, eyes wide in disbelief. Gasps rippled across the hall like a wave that no one could stop. She didn't run, she didn't shout, and she didn't beg. Leora's steps were slow, deliberate, each one echoing in the marble hall like a drumbeat of justice. Her eyes scanned the room calmly, landing finally on Tay and Sophia. Tay's proud smile faltered for a fraction of a second, and Sophia's confident gaze wavered, though neither realized why just yet. They had expected triumph, a wedding full of praise and admiration, but now, standing before them, was the woman whose love, trust, and money had been taken and used against her. Leora's presence shifted everything. The air felt heavier, charged with anticipation. Whispers began, soft at first, then louder, as guests leaned toward one another, realizing the truth without fully knowing the story. Yet Leora didn't speak a word. Her silence was louder than any accusation, stronger than any confrontation. She wasn't there to plead or cry. She wasn't there to dramatize her pain. She was there to reclaim what was hers, her power, her dignity, her victory. As she walked past rows of stunned guests, her head held high, the weight of her betrayal transformed into a quiet strength that filled the hall. Every eye followed her, and every heart paused, sensing that so. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of the announcement, 350 words, in paragraph form. The hall was alive with music, laughter, and the soft rustle of silk as the judge began to bless Tay and Sophia's union. Guests leaned forward, smiling, clapping, and murmuring congratulations. The couple beamed, certain that their triumph was complete, unaware that the moment they had waited for was about to be pierced by truth. Suddenly, the doors at the back of the hall opened again. A lawyer entered, moving with quiet authority, a stack of folded documents held firmly in his hands. The chatter began to die down as he stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. Tay straightened instinctively, pride swelling in his chest, but there was an unspoken tension in the air he couldn't place. Sophia smiled, confident as ever, not realizing the storm about to hit their perfect day. The lawyer cleared his throat, lifting his voice so every ear could hear. "By the authority of this court," he declared, unfolding the papers with a deliberate precision, "this property, including the hall, the house, and all associated assets, legally belongs to Mrs. Leora Kanda." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The judge froze mid-blessing, the musicians stopped playing, and even the chandelier seemed to flicker under the sudden tension. Silence fell over the room like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Guests exchanged confused glances, whispers rising and falling like waves. Tay's smile faltered, his hand trembling slightly as he looked at the papers, then at the woman standing before him. Sophia's face drained of color, her carefully practiced composure cracking under the weight of reality. Leora didn't flinch. Her head was held high, her gaze steady, a quiet calm radiating from her as if the room itself belonged to her now. She didn't gloat, she didn't speak, she simply let the truth land where it was needed. Every eye in the hall now recognized. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of his frozen smile, 350 words, in paragraph form. Tay's grin, which had been so full of pride just moments ago, vanished as if swept away by a sudden cold wind. His chest felt tight, his fingers trembling as he glanced down at the documents in the lawyer's hands. The house, the grand hall, the very roof that had been filled with laughter, music, and his imagined triumph, none of it belonged to him anymore. Every step he had taken, every decision he had made believing he was clever, had led him here, powerless, exposed, and completely undone. For a moment he tried to laugh, just a small nervous chuckle to cover the shock, to pretend it didn't hurt, but it failed. The sound caught in his throat and fell into silence. His eyes darted to Sophia, searching for reassurance, for some shared understanding that this was all a mistake, but Sophia's own expression mirrored his panic. The confident, proud bride he had imagined would be his partner in triumph now looked lost, unsure and afraid. The perfect picture they had painted together had crumbled before their very eyes. Leora stood a few feet away, calm and unshakable. Her eyes didn't flash with anger. They didn't plead or threaten. They simply held truth. She had been hurt, yes, betrayed, yes, but she had taken her pain and turned it into power. The very house that had been theirs only because she had unknowingly paid for it was now hers in every legal sense. The woman they had mocked, stolen from, and underestimated was now the one holding control, and Tay could do nothing. His pride, once his armor, had failed him completely. Every lie he had told, every betrayal he had plotted, now seemed small and fragile in the light of her quiet victory. His laughter had been replaced with trembling silence, and for the first time, he felt the weight of consequences he had never imagined. Guests whispered, eyes shifting from him to Leora, understanding Fu. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of the crowd's whisper, 350 words, in paragraph form. The air in the grand hall shifted. What had been full of music, laughter, and celebration now felt heavy with tension. Guests leaned toward each other, their voices hushed but urgent, whispers spreading like wildfire. Some shook their heads, eyes wide with disbelief, unable to process what had just happened. Others stared openly at Tay, pity etched on their faces, realizing that the man who had seemed so proud, so untouchable, was now exposed for all to see. Leora remained calm, every step measured, her posture regal as the whispers grew louder. The power in her presence was undeniable. People glanced at her and then back at Tay, as if the air itself was drawing a clear line between the woman who had been wronged and the man who had betrayed her. Her silence spoke louder than any speech could. Every eye in the hall seemed to say the same thing. The woman who had been underestimated had won, and the man who had cheated was finally facing the truth. Some guests leaned closer to one another, pointing subtly, murmuring questions about how such a twist had occurred. Others spoke softly in admiration, praising Leora's courage, her patience, and the quiet way she had orchestrated this moment. The whispers weren't cruel, they carried awe, a mix of shock and respect. In a single instant, the perfect wedding had transformed into a stage for shame, not for the woman who had lost, but for the couple who had thought victory was theirs. Tay tried to recover, opening his mouth to explain, to joke, to deflect, but the murmurs drowned him out. Every word felt hollow. His laughter, once confident, had vanished, replaced with embarrassment that even the music could not mask. Sophia's face, once proud and glowing, was now pale and tense, the realization that their triumph had crumbled written clearly in every line of her expression. As whispers and glance. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of their wedding night disaster, 350 words, in paragraph form. After the last guest had left, the hall emptied, leaving Tay and Sophia alone in what they thought was their perfect world. The lights reflected off Sophia's gown, sparkling like stars, and Tay laughed softly, imagining that the night would be filled with private joy and celebration. They unpacked gifts, arranged flowers, and toasted to a future they believed was theirs forever. Every detail had been planned, every smile rehearsed. They didn't notice the quiet, almost invisible presence of change hanging in the air, like a storm waiting to break. Midnight came. The city outside slept under a calm sky, unaware that the celebration inside had already begun to crumble. Suddenly, the door opened, and two uniformed security officers stepped in. Their expressions were serious, and their hands held official-looking papers. "Sir, madam," one said firmly, "you are required to vacate the property immediately. This house no longer belongs to you." Time seemed to stop. Tay froze, his hand half raised as if to protest, but the words caught in his throat. Sophia's eyes widened, her confident posture collapsing instantly. Their laughter, their plans, their imagined future, all vanished in the cold, hard reality of that single statement. They looked around at the opulent hall, the flowers, the decorations, and the golden threads of her gown, realizing with a shock that every corner of this space had once belonged to the woman they had betrayed. Every joy they thought was theirs was built on stolen trust, and now the weight of that truth had come crashing down on them. Tay tried to speak, to argue, but the security officers remained firm, unmoved by his panic. Sophia clutched his arm, fear replacing the pride she had carried all day. They gathered their belongings, their movements frantic and shaky, unable to process the humiliation of being F. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of Homeless Under the Moon, 350 words, in paragraph form. Tay and Sophia stepped out into the cold night, their wedding clothes still clinging to them, glittering and heavy with shame. The air was sharp against their skin, and each breath they took felt like a reminder of the life they had lost in an instant. Their luggage lay scattered on the steps, forgotten in the chaos of their sudden eviction, each suitcase a symbol of dreams they had thought were theirs forever. They stood frozen, staring at the streetlights casting long shadows, their pride shattered beyond repair. Sophia's gown, once the pride of the city, now felt like a cruel mockery. The jewels in her hair, the golden threads of her dress, every bit of it had been paid for by Leora, the woman they had betrayed and underestimated. And now those very savings had built the cage that trapped them outside, a house they could no longer claim, a life they had stolen only to see slip through their fingers. Tay's hands shook as he reached for the door handle, then dropped them helplessly, realizing that no amount of pleading or scheming could bring it back. People passed by, their curious glances cutting deeper than any words. Some whispered, some pointed, and others only shook their heads in disbelief, witnessing the fall of a couple who had seemed untouchable. The city, once alive with celebration for them, now felt cold and judgmental. The music, the laughter, the applause, all memories now haunting echoes, replaced by the biting wind and their own stunned silence. Sophia clung to Tay, but even her grip could not hide the tremor in her body, the panic in her eyes. Tay's mind raced, trying to imagine a way out, but every option seemed smaller, weaker, and impossible. The realization settled like ice in their hearts. The power they had thought they held was gone. Leora had turned betrayal into triumph, pain into victory, and in the Here's a fully expanded, emotional, and conversational version of Leora's silent victory, 350 words, in paragraph form. Leora didn't linger to watch Tay and Sophia's humiliation. She didn't need to. The streets of Nadira had already whispered the story, and the sight of them standing outside in the cold, defeated, was enough. She didn't gloat, didn't shout her triumph because her victory wasn't in making them suffer. It was in reclaiming what was rightfully hers and proving, quietly but unmistakably, that betrayal could never define her. Every step she took back to her car was calm, deliberate, a woman fully in control of her life and destiny. As she drove through the city, the lights reflected off the polished surfaces of her car, and for the first time in weeks, Leora allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. The mansion she had worked so hard to secure came into view, its grand gates welcoming her home like an embrace. It wasn't just a house. It was the symbol of her strength, her perseverance, and the intelligence with which she had turned pain into power. Each room, each detail, each carefully chosen piece of art reminded her that this life was hers, earned with wisdom and effort, not stolen or taken for granted. Inside, the air smelled of fresh flowers and polished wood, of success and independence. She didn't call anyone to boast, didn't post flashy updates online. Her silence was deliberate. It was louder than any public display of revenge could ever be. Friends who visited later would see her calm confidence, the way she moved through her home like a queen in her kingdom, and they would understand. This was a woman who had been wronged and had risen higher than anyone could have imagined. Leora poured herself a cup of tea, seated by the window overlooking the city that had once felt like a stage for betrayal. Now it looked like the backdrop to her triumph. She thought of Tay and Sophia, not with hatred, but with the quiet satisfaction of Sumio. Here's a fully expanded, emotional and conversational version of the story that lived on, 250 words, in paragraph form. By morning, the story had spread across Nadira like wildfire. Everyone spoke in hushed tones, then louder, then with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The man who had used his fiancée's savings to marry another had been reduced to standing outside in the cold on his own wedding night. Tay and Sophia's fall became the cautionary tale people whispered about in markets, in offices and in cafes, a story of pride, betrayal, and sudden consequences. No one could forget the image. The couple, once so proud, now powerless, trapped by the very money they had stolen. And everywhere there was Leora. She became the symbol of resilience, intelligence, and quiet strength. People didn't just talk about her victory, they celebrated it. They admired the way she had taken heartbreak and transformed it into triumph, building wealth, independence, and respect while remaining graceful and composed. Her name was on everyone's lips, not because she sought attention, but because her courage and determination had earned it. She had shown that betrayal, no matter how deep, could never destroy someone with the will to rise. Children whispered her name in awe, adults shared her story in reverent tones, and the city itself seemed to carry her triumph in its streets. Leora's life became proof that strength isn't always loud. It can be quiet, calculated, unstoppable. Her story lived on, not as a tale of revenge, but as a reminder that no one can take away the spirit of someone who refuses to be defeated. And in Nadira, that lesson was remembered forever. This completes your full 4,000-word viral script for My fiancé used my savings to marry his ex, so I made them homeless on their wedding night. If you want, I can now combine all 15 parts into one polished, continuous script with smooth transitions and dialogue cues, ready for reading or video adaptation.